I've never been the biggest fan of Kirby. Now, it's not to say that I hate or even dislike the series. I mean, look at this little guy. How could I possibly hate him? Okay, fair point, but I digress. Now, my indifference towards Kirby comes down more to taste. Since the series' inception in 1992, the Kirby series has always been intended for those who are new to platformers, so the games are characterized by both their surprising depth, but also relative ease. And as someone who has played tons of platformers over the years, the lack of difficulty present in Kirby leads me to find a lot of the games dull. I also don't have a nostalgic attachment to the series to compensate for that. When I was young, I was playing Mario and Sonic, not Kirby. That also means I don't have a lot of experience with the series. I've sampled a couple of games over the years, but I can count the ones that I've played on one hand. In fact, of all the games in the series, the one I played the most is Kirby Air Ride. Even then, this wasn't one I ever owned. It was another one of those games I recall renting a lot, or at least my little brother rented it a lot. I don't recall liking it too much, and was surprised to discover it had a cult following when I entered college. I was also surprised when Nintendo announced a sequel last year. Nintendo typically doesn't roll out a Kirby game until later in a console's life cycle, and they already had their racing game base covered with Mario Kart World. It just seemed like an odd choice to me. Speaking honestly, I didn't intend to play this one. As I said, I'm not the biggest fan of this series, let alone Air Ride, and I had other games I wanted to play. However, my girlfriend, who developed a casual interest in gaming when she started dating me, thought the game looked fun and asked if I could get it so we could play together. I told her I would, and then she went and bought it for me as a Valentine's Day gift. God, I'm a lucky man. Anyway, because of her generosity and primarily because I want to thank her for taking the time to try to understand my love of gaming, I decided to add Kirby Air Riders to my list of games to cover for Beyond the Hype Train. Then I got caught up in the N64 series and had to put it off. Now that that is all done though, I decided it was time to put some hours into Air Riders. And you know what? It was pretty damn good. Though it's not my favorite racing game, and I certainly recommend Mario Kart World over this any day, Air Riders still succeeds at what it sets out to do, and is another great addition to the Switch 2's ever-growing library.
3, 2, 1, start!
There isn't any story to speak of in Kirby Air Riders. Well, actually there is, but it's tucked away in a corner and isn't really anything of note, so I didn't really bother. Besides, is there anyone who was picking up Air Riders who was expecting a good story? Let's just move on to the presentation, which is spectacular. The characters all look and move great, the levels are varied and visually stunning, the visual effects are pure eye candy, and it all runs at a crisp frame rate. The screen does have a tendency to get a little cluttered at times, but for the most part, I would call Kirby Air Riders a great looking game. Sounds great too. The sound effects are nice and crunchy, nothing like building up a charge and getting that nice boom as you jump to high speeds, or blowing away the competition with a well-aimed power-up. The gameplay in Air Riders just feels explosive. The soundtrack is good fun as well. I've always found that the music in Kirby games to be a little funny in that they tend to sport oddball combinations of rock, orchestral, and fairy tale whimsy. But it works, especially here in Air Riders. It gives the game a nice edge despite the fact that most of the characters in the game are adorable. As for the gameplay, the mission statement of Kirby Air Ride was to simplify the mechanics of a racing game down in a manner similar to how the game's director, Masahiro Sakurai, simplified the mechanics of fighting games for Super Smash Bros. And I've always found that to be a little silly. It made sense to try and simplify a fighting game because they are very complex games, but racing games, I find they are pretty simple as is. Unless you're playing something like Gran Turismo, I feel there isn't much to simplify. As a result, I'd say Kirby Air Ride oversimplified things, boiling down the mechanics of a racing game to just one button. And I find that has the opposite effect it was intended to have, as it makes the game less intuitive. When me and my girlfriend played this, it took her a second to wrap her head around the fact that you didn't have to hold a button to accelerate, an issue I remember having playing Air Ride as a kid as well. So yeah, in concept, I'd say Kirby Air Ride, and by extension Air Riders, is fundamentally flawed. In practice, however, it works just fine, once you figure out how you're supposed to play the game, I mean. As I said, the game only uses one button, and the button applies the brakes. Forward momentum is automatic, so the brake is the only way to control your speed. It's also primarily how you corner, so when you come to a tight turn, you apply the brakes, and as you slow down, you'll be able to slide around the bend. It will also build up a charge, so when you release the button, you'll get a burst of speed depending on how long you held the button. It's simple and easy to understand, and it does make for a good gameplay hook. Again, it is fun to slam on the brakes, slide around a corner, then jump back to high speed as you release the button. The game is called Air Riders 2, so if you hit a ramp, you can fly for a bit, which can be used to reach shortcuts on a few tracks. Just be sure you land flat or else you're going to lose speed. There is also a combative element to the gameplay. As you race, there will be various enemies on the track that you can either take out with a spin move or inhale, at which point you'll either shoot them out as a projectile or gain a temporary power-up to use. As you take out enemies and attack other racers, you'll slowly fill up a gauge, and once it's full, you can use a special move, which varies from character to character. And yes, one of the new additions from Kirby Air Ride is that you now have multiple characters to play as. Though it was true that you could play as a few alternate characters in Air Ride like Meta Knight and King DDD, their abilities were more limited than that of Kirby. You couldn't select a star for them to ride, and they couldn't inhale enemies. Here, the characters all share Kirby's abilities, but have their own strengths and weaknesses, as well as special abilities. It was a smart move, and it adds a nice hint of customization to the game. This carries over into the fact that the characters can ride any and all stars in the game. In fact, the various stars are the main way you can really mix up the gameplay here. Though most of the stars in the game function in the same way the default Warp Star does, just with different strengths and weaknesses, some of them require a completely different manner of operation. For example, the Swerve Star has a high top speed and can stop on a dime, but the catch is you can't turn, so you have to stop and rotate if you want to turn. My personal preference is the Bulk Star. How this one works is that it will only accelerate if you have some charge from the meter, which is a problem if you're racing on a track with a lot of straightaways because you'll have to stop and charge it. However, it's got a high top speed and can plow right through most enemies and obstacles, which works well with my aggressive driving style. I also find the contrast between it and the ever adorable Rick to be hilarious, so this ended up being my preferred combination. So Kirby Air Riders is good fun, but it does have some shortcomings, most of which come about due to my frustrations with its insistence on only using one button. Braking, inhaling, using power-ups, and doing all that is mapped to the same button, and at times it feels like the controls are getting a little confused. I don't know why some of this can be mapped to another button. I mean, the special moves are mapped to another button, so why not map some other moves to another button? And I know that goes against what Kirby Air Riders is trying to do, but one-button games are silly in concept anyway. A lot of veteran developers like the idea because they view it as a return to simpler times, but for crying out loud, most NES games use two buttons. It's complete nonsense. I also feel like the spin move is a little awkward. You activate it by spinning the stick, and the input is really sensitive. I swear it happens almost every time I jam the stick in the opposite direction. The game does compensate for its fixation on simplicity with a variety of game modes though. You of course have Air Ride, which is your basic racing mode, but you also have Top Ride, where the racing takes the form of a top-down racer. A nice little distraction that is a good throwback to racing games of old. Probably the most famous game mode in Air Riders is the City Trial, making its return by popular demand from Air Ride. This mode sees players dropped into a large map with 5 minutes on the clock. You then race around trying to find your desired star, picking up power-ups to beef up your stats, and responding to various happenings around the map. At the end of the 5 minutes, everyone is rounded up for a random event, which can range from a simple race to a lawn jump contest or an arena battle. It's fun, frantic, and the random nature of the finale acts as an equalizer to inexperienced players. Even if you get one of the legendary rides like the Hydra or Dragoon, that isn't going to do you any good if you get an event that doesn't play to their strengths. These events also show up in the game's story mode, Road Trip, which is basically City Trial without the city stuff. The content on offer is pretty damn good too, with lots of characters, stars, and tracks, all of which is unlocked the more you play, much like in a Smash game. All the different game modes can be played online as well, so you're sure to get plenty of good mileage out of this one. I'm certainly excited to play more with this with my girlfriend. Since Dickhead's tariffs got overturned, I've noticed that the Switch 2 games aren't being sold for $80 or $90 across the board anymore. $70 has been standard full retail price for a while now, so I'm okay with that price point. I think Kirby Air Riders earns its price tag anyway, and it's another one that would be a good candidate for DLC in the future, as long as it's free. I'm still bitter about the Bonanza DLC, for the record, Nintendo.
Final lap.
Kirby Air Riders is a good time. As I said, it's far from my favorite racing game, and I much prefer something like Mario Kart. But Air Riders is far from bad. The presentation is rad as hell, the gameplay, though conceptually flawed, is functional in practice, and is full of bursting with options and content. If you're a fan of Air Ride, this is especially worth picking up because it is an improvement by all accounts. If you're looking for another great racing game on the Switch too, I highly recommend Kirby Air Riders. It might not be able to keep up with Mario Kart World, but when it takes to the skies, it can fly pretty damn high.